much. And first of all, I'm really happy to be presenting this year. Even this virtual way is great. I just want to say again, Katie, thanks for being the great conductor of this new wondrous conference this year. But first, I'd like to acknowledge country. And as a woman who grew up in England and as a psychologist, I guess I really feel like I'm only just starting to understand the impact of one culture exerting its power over another. And with respect, I honour the traditional owners of the land upon which we all meet today, acknowledge the Gumbanga people and their continuing connection to the land, water and community. I honour and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and this land was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I wanted to explore how school experiences impact on well-being, specifically for high school students experiencing dyslexic type challenges. And it's come out of my work as a psychologist in schools and some of the themes that I've seen over my 20 years working in schools. And when I talk about dyslexic type challenges, I'm really referring to challenges with reading and or spelling skills. It's well known that students with these type of challenges are more likely to experience poorer well-being at school, struggling to achieve in a system that equates literacy with success. So I'm going to take you through the journey of my PhD so far, showing you the progress that I've made since last praxis and focusing on initial findings. So the term dyslexic type challenges, I'm choosing to use this term for a few reasons. It's respectful, strength-based, acknowledges that literacy skills are not connected to intelligence, that all students can learn. It's inclusive and equitable. You don't need to have an expensive assessment to take part. However, it also includes students who have had the privilege of accessing a comprehensive educational assessment. Also, it bypasses the complex and political definitional issues surrounding the dyslexia debate and the issues to do with selecting dyslexia students for dyslexia studies, because without a clear definition, this has made this difficult. So instead, it allows a firm educational focus and provides opportunity for student voice and agency, whereby students have self-nominated in response to recruitment presentation at their school. It's well acknowledged that experiences of learning impact student well-being in schools. And this study draws on previous well-being research, which found that recognition theory can be useful in understanding well-being in schools. And so this research will also draw on honest conceptualizations using the translated terms for school, cared for, respected and valued, to talk about well-being. And I will use these terms in the research when I talk with students about well-being, or I did, and I continue to. So I wanted to find out what students say about school experiences if they relate to having dyslexic type challenges. What supports or hinders their well-being at school, and what do they really want teachers to know? And second of all, I wanted to hear from teachers. How do they perceive well-being for these students, and what do they do to address it? And lastly, I wanted to see whether and how recognition theory might facilitate mutual understanding of the impact for these students and to help teachers to respond more effectively. So as flagged, this study will draw on recognition theory, childhood studies and student well-being in schoolwork to explore experience of this group of students who self-nominate as having dyslexic type challenges. So the research took 4 phases, included the first phase, the pre-phase 1 was a youth advisory group whereby 4 students helped me make sure that the activities and all the materials were student friendly for this group of students for phase 1. Phase 1 consisted of semi-structured focus groups with students in 8 different high schools across regional New South Wales, across all sectors of the school systems. Students identified support, barriers and solutions for well-being at school, including the things that they most wanted teachers to know. Phase 2 included 12 students from phase 1 who wanted to stay in the research. And they created artworks to thicken messages from phase 1 to go together to provide a stimulus for teacher interviews in phase 3, so that the students' voices could be clearly represented. And phase 3 heard from the teachers about their perspectives, as well as how they responded to the student messages and pictures, and considered what they as teachers and their colleagues may need to better respond to students with dyslexic type challenges at school to improve well-being. So the data collection used the Bono Toolkit, which was created by Joanne Tippett at Manchester University, and it helps to capture views of students and teachers, and it allowed for structured processes by which to hear both individual and group voice for the students and individual voices for teachers. And the kit was really cool to use, and it engages participants by using reusable coloured shapes to capture ideas. So those leaves, which are the shapes, each leaf represents a different type of question, so each colour, based on de Bono's 6 thinking hats. And as well, there were further icons that enable participants to further prioritise ideas at this data collection stage. So the kit uses a metaphor of a tree, and it's a mind mapping tool that enables everyone to have a say, with the focus on the felt, not the researcher, and enables the students to keep track of the process, as well as the researcher being able to help summarise what the students have said easily at the end of the session. Oops, sorry. As you can see, the red icon at the bottom helps students to identify what idea was most important, and the yellow icon later in the process helped students to identify the message that they felt they most wanted teachers to know. So, what did students think is important? Students identified that the need for teachers to understand that everyone is different and may learn differently. And students identified the need to feel known by teachers, to feel understood. And students also wanted teachers to provide help and support, particularly when they feel anxious or overwhelmed at school. But what was it that students most wanted teachers to know? Similarly, students wanted teachers to understand all about learning differences, the science behind it, recognizing that all students are individuals with different strengths and challenges, so they can be creative to help students get around the difficulties and provide useful support. Students wanted to be seen, heard, and respected for who they are. All the student messages were created into a pack of cards with the colour corresponding to the coloured leaf on the Ketso kit in phase 1. These cards were used as a student stimulus in phase 3 and were given to teachers to consider alongside the student artworks created in phase 2. The cards were also taken along to phase 2, whereby these artworks were created by students who chose to stay in the research. And the researcher, that was me, bought an art workshop in a bag. The students viewed the cards and created images that they felt best represented all the messages from phase 1, which included one of their own messages. After consideration of those messages and viewing some examples of some artworks that help to tell a message, students then designed their own artwork to further support the phase 1 messages. So welcome to the gallery of student artworks. We haven't got a lot of time, but I'm just wanting to flick through them so you get a flavour of some of these artworks. So as you can see, some of those artworks that have very impactful, vibrant messages that teachers could directly hear from students in considering their views on these issues. So findings from phase 1 and phase 3 indicated that many of the responses from both students and teachers were to do with teaching and learning, closely followed by feelings and relationships. Specifically, how these impact student well-being both positively and negatively. So the research set up a dialogue between student and teacher messages. After reading the messages and seeing the artworks, teachers responded. Themes included the need for teacher training, that the system didn't always work for all students, that teachers need to acknowledge strengths and work together with students and not just focus on areas of difficulty. Most of the teachers' messages to students spoke of genuine recognition, of encouragement, persistence, and trust. They shared positive stories of increased teacher awareness that's coming into schools now, acknowledging that it's time now to do things differently. We have the information, and importantly, the impact of student providing teachers with the feedback was reported by the teachers to be very powerful. So while teachers and students expressed many similar views, when I coded the students' and teachers' responses separately into a word frequency image, it's here that I started to see some differences. Where students focus on teachers and feelings, such as at the top, feeling overwhelmed, in the middle, trying and read and hard, and at the bottom, embarrassed amongst others. When we look at the teacher's word cloud, what stands out for me is a lack of resources, issues with maybe not enough specialist staff, and the need for further support and further learning to help support learning in the classroom. So because my research, I really wanted to keep students front and central, and in the design and all the processes and the ethics took a really long time, but this was all part of really ensuring student-friendly approaches. So I've created a little video using the Bible to create an initial findings video, and I used this Bible material, what's it called? It's a software to create the recruitment initially. So I'll just move on to that, and I'm just going to move you all out of the way because you're in the way and I can't put my play on. Okay. So, can recognition theory help us here? So the findings indicate that recognition theory can provide a helpful lens for understanding student experiences and thus well-being at school. So the research, I'm going to take it one step further to suggest that in order for high school teachers to provide authentic recognition of their students, they really do need to have updated understanding about the science of learning differences, and specifically to understand that reading and spelling skills and processing are not connected to intelligence or laziness. And with this updated understanding, teachers can focus on building respectful relationships. With trust developed, I really believe that students and teachers can work together so that students can feel cared for and respected and valued at school. So what does that mean in practice? Well, specifically, this research points to high school teachers taking on the role of learning detectives to see the clues of suspected student processing differences, the strengths and the challenge, and along with their expert understanding, they will be in a position to know how to better manage this in the classroom, supporting students in the process.
Just 2 minutes, Jane.
Thank you. Many processing difficulties have the potential to result in barriers to learning and well-being and feeling like you belong at school. However, it doesn't have to be like this. So there's many different pathways to learning, and students may need to use different strategies to reach their learning goals and potential. Teaching staff can take on the collaborative role of learning detective alongside students, helping to use data and dialogue to assist with understanding, as well as practical supports and interventions, and including the use of assistive technology, so that students can really participate and feel like they belong in their school community, feeling cared for, respected, and valued. So that brings me to the end of my presentation today. Some references, and thank you for making it to the end of Praxis. And in the last session, if you've got any questions or feedback, I'll forgive you if you don't, because I'm sure everyone's exhausted. But thanks a lot for being here. It means a lot.
Thank you, Jane. That was so interesting and artistic, and it was great. Thank you. And does anyone have any questions for Jane? Shay, hi.
Hi. Thanks, Jane. Amazing. It's really great to see your progression and where you're going and all of the amazing things that you're doing with what you're doing. Is it, I'm just wondering what you want to do at the end of it, like where you're going to, where you see your research into schools for teachers, because you've got so much knowledge and so much teacher training, professional development potential.
Yes, look, at this point, I feel still bogged down by more data because I've got plenty more data to go through, but that next level. But yes, I do want to do something practical. I mean, that's the whole, I didn't really mean to do a PhD, and I sort of just was trying to do a systemic work more effectively, because I was just hearing the same old story, getting referred students with mental health issues. And when we pulled back a little bit, it wasn't really a mental health issue. It's actually a secondary issue connected to unidentified learning difficulties that had been masked or hidden or misunderstood or whatever like that. So yes, I do want to do teacher professional development, and people are really interested, and I think there's a big change in this field at the moment. People are really getting the connection between learning and well-being, and if we want to improve well-being at schools, I mean, it's the big talk, lots of talk about how many counsellors, how many psychologists in schools, but we can't ignore learning, because that's a huge part of what happens at school. And yeah, if you have literacy difficulties or processing speed difficulties or any sort of difficulties that doesn't work with the traditional ways of learning, then you're not going to be successful. You're not going to feel like you can belong. So yes, I'm very passionate about student well-being and educating teachers, because when teachers get it, they just kill it. It's brilliant, and it's a massive game changer for young people. Yeah,
wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your work, and You make me laugh. You didn't mean to do a PhD. That's just
That was
that's just wonderful,
Oh,
Jane. That's just the best. That has to be the best line that I have heard in this conference. That's just the best. I didn't mean to do a PhD. It just
that
happened.
was never on the life plan.
Oh, you're just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Shay. And does anyone else have a question for Jane? Hi, Lisa. Hello.
Hi. Well done, Jane. I loved hearing about that. And it was interesting because hearing about, last year you did it all about the model, the tree thing, and it's really cool to see the next phase. Of course, I could ask you, this is my sister-in-law, and so I'm very proud of her. I guess I could have asked her this before this, but anyways, well done. My question is actually, it's about the group, like schools, and you're working with groups of kids to come up with these artworks, the whole mapping thing, and they did. Maybe I missed it, but do they then kind of form a group and, with young artworks, the whole, do they then kind of form a group and each other often and finding like-minded people? And I'm just wondering if you've looked at that aspect of the social aspect of finding support by finding other people that are like you, and if that kind of fits into the model at all, if that makes any sense.
It hasn't fitted into the research because we're just really trying to get the student views and the teacher view and trying to find ways that they can work together. But some schools I work with groups, and it really depended on what the teachers felt and what the students felt and the age of the students, and should they be in groups of 4 or 1 or 2, depending on who returned their consent form. So it was very random, and we had groups of 1, groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 4. Some students, they said, I don't want to be with anyone else, because it's immensely private for some young people until they hear an adult say, oh, it's no biggie, we can do this, we can work with this, we can do things, shake it around, we can come up with tricks. But most of the students have been desperately trying to hide this their whole school career. So in one group, it was amazing actually, because one young boy was hiding under the table for most of the session until he sort of realized that I'm on his side, and then just became at the end said, hey, can we all watch this video? And it was like an 8-minute video, and I'm like, okay, that wasn't on the plan. But we watched it, and it was all, he'd found this amazing video about learning differences, and it was a really empowering one. And the whole group just sat there like, yes, that lad. Yes, so there's lots of power in it, but there's so much shame that has to be overcome before we can get to that. Right. Yeah.
So recognition theory is more about teachers of students rather than of each other. Well, I don't know anything about it.
It's about recognition of anybody, and the biggest issue for me is the problem is the lack of recognition with the teachers and some students. The peers come into it, but all the findings were significantly more bothered about how teachers didn't have the recognition, because if the teachers didn't have it, they couldn't manage the peers. But when peers had it with each other, they recognized each other and they supported each other and they got each other. And particularly some of the quirky kids said, oh, we're the quirky group and we've all got differences and we're just so supportive of each other. It's brilliant, but we do it when no one's looking. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really, they are very clear. And the thing is, a lot of students they're not empowered because no one has talked to them about it. No one has said, actually, it's okay, we can talk about this. It's not an area they've been able to have a say about things that impact them. It's sort of seen as a taboo topic, especially if they've been told they're lazy or, all that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, very,
thank you.
Very difficult for them to really face up to the power imbalance of saying to a teacher, that's not okay to talk to me like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. And Jane, I have a comment from Nathaniel, and he said that this will be very connected with teaching in general, not just DDC affected students, valuing the difference among all students, quite Freudian.
Free air.
Oh, pardon me.
Free Aryan. I don't know.
I knew that. I was just testing you all. Okay.
I think you're right. I think you're right, but I think it's significantly deeper and more painful if it's not there for this group of students.
Mhm.
Well, and not more than other students, but because it's literacy and school's all about literacy, it's very difficult for those students to be
Mhm.
valued in that space.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anne had her hand up just a moment ago.
Yes, that's what I thought. So, Anne, would you like to ask Jane a question?
Final question.
Yes.
You're on mute though, Anne.
Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Because I can speak to Jane another time. I thought I saw someone else's hand up.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess in a way it's really more of a comment, but firstly, thank you, Jane, and great presentation. And I have the great fortune of being one of Jane's supervisors. So, and learning difficulties is an area of mine. And I've always had a bit of a focus on the importance of, you know, just good teachers and classroom teachers knowing how to teach, you know, the skills of reading and writing, and some may say it's lost, whatever. But so I came in to supervise this student that was all about student wellbeing, students with dyslexia and their wellbeing. And I just find it kind of astounding that when you think about what students might want for their wellbeing, students with dyslexia, you might think it would be, you know, a quiet place to go, some extra teacher aid time, you know, an early morning tea break, so that, but it's none of those kind of soft options. They want good teaching from their teachers. I just find that amazing that, I mean, if you would have asked them, Jane, what would improve your learning outcomes, and they would have said good knowledge from the teachers about all these strategies, it's like, yeah, I get that. But that you ask them, what is it that teachers can do to improve their well-being, and they said, learn how to teach me well. I just find that, you know, very strong finding and very interesting, you know.
And I think, and there is a lot of the other stuff as well, the practical things. We want more,
Yes.
we want more breaks, and we want this, and we want more teacher zones, and we want all that. But the repeated themes are much more about this. We actually just want to be respected, and we
Yeah.
want teachers to understand how we learn, because we learn differently, or we feel like we learn differently, and we just need to do it differently.
Mhm.
So.
Okay. Well,